A deputy slapped a black woman in the sheriff's lobby. Less than 24 hours later, the governor called her ma'am. On a cold Monday morning, a black woman walked into a sheriff's department carrying nothing but a worn leather folder and a quiet sense of purpose. Less than 60 seconds later, she was humiliated in front of strangers by a deputy who assumed she didn't belong. But what nobody inside that building knew was that Naomi Carter wasn't just another visitor. Within days, hidden recordings, buried secrets, a courageous witness, and a billionaire's shocking confession would expose the truth. And when the governor finally looked at the same woman everyone dismissed and respectfully called her ma'am, an entire department realized they had judged the wrong person. A cold wind rolled through Brookdale County before sunrise, rattling bare tree branches against power lines and carrying the smell of rain through the quiet streets. By 7:30 that Monday morning, the town was beginning to wake. Traffic lights blinked over nearly empty intersections. A city bus groaned past a row of brick storefronts. The windows of a small diner glowed warm against the gray morning. Naomi Carter sat behind the wheel of a modest rental car and looked at the building across the street. Brookdale County Sheriff's Headquarters. 3 stories tall, brown brick, American flag hanging above the entrance. Nothing about it seemed remarkable, yet Naomi remained still for a moment, her hands resting quietly on the steering wheel. She had walked into hundreds of government buildings throughout her life. Community centers, city halls, schools, church basements, shelters. Places where people came carrying hope, fear, frustration, or nowhere else to go. She had spent most of her adult life helping strangers solve problems nobody else wanted to touch. And somehow, after all these years, she still felt the same thing before entering a new room. A small question. What kind of people would she meet inside? She reached over and picked up a worn leather folder from the passenger seat. The corners were softened from years of use. The folder looked ordinary. So did Naomi. At 45 years old, she dressed simply. Dark coat, practical shoes, no jewelry except a small silver watch. No badge, no title displayed anywhere. Nothing that announced her importance. She preferred it that way. Outside, the clouds thickened overhead. Naomi stepped from the car and crossed the parking lot. The cold air bit at her cheeks. A few deputies entered through a side entrance without noticing her. She walked toward the main doors alone. The glass doors opened with a soft mechanical hiss. Warm air greeted her. The lobby was quiet. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A receptionist sat behind reinforced glass. A television mounted in one corner played muted local news. 2 civilians waited on plastic chairs near the wall. Everything seemed ordinary. Naomi took a few steps forward. She had barely reached the center of the room when another door opened behind her. Deputy Ryan Holt walked in carrying a cup of coffee. Tall, broad-shouldered, confident in the way some people become when they spend years believing every room belongs to them. Another deputy followed a few feet behind him. Ryan's eyes landed on Naomi immediately. His pace slowed. Something about her presence seemed to irritate him before she had spoken a single word. He looked her up and down. The plain coat, the folder, the unfamiliar face. A judgment formed almost instantly. Naomi noticed it. She had seen that look before, many times. People often decided who she was before learning her name. Ryan stopped a few feet away. "Can I help you?" he asked. The words sounded polite. His tone did not. Naomi offered a calm smile. "I have a meeting here this morning." Ryan glanced toward his partner. The partner smirked. "A meeting?" "Yes." "With who?" Naomi remained composed. "They'll be expecting me." For some reason, that answer seemed to bother him even more. Ryan took a step closer. The room felt smaller. The receptionist looked up. One of the civilians shifted uncomfortably in their seat. Still, nobody said anything. Ryan folded his arms. "You staff?" "No." "You law enforcement?" Naomi simply answered, I'm here for an appointment. His expression hardened. The conversation should have ended there. Instead, something changed. A need to challenge. A need to prove authority. A need Naomi recognized all too well. Ryan pointed toward the entrance. Then you need to wait outside. Naomi blinked. I'm sorry? You heard me. She remained respectful. My meeting is scheduled here. Not anymore. Silence stretched across the lobby. The receptionist lowered her eyes. The civilians stared at the floor. Nobody wanted involvement. Naomi felt disappointment settle inside her chest. Not fear, not anger. Disappointment. Because this moment felt familiar. Too familiar. She had spent years helping communities heal divisions. Years encouraging people to treat each other with dignity. Yet here it was again. A stranger deciding she didn't belong. Still, she kept her voice calm. I believe there's been a misunderstanding. Ryan laughed. The sound echoed off the tile floor. His partner laughed too. Naomi noticed the reaction from everyone else. Nobody joined in. Nobody objected either. The silence somehow felt louder than the laughter. Ryan moved closer. Close enough that Naomi could smell coffee on his breath. You need to leave. I have every right to be here. The words came out steady, not aggressive, not emotional, just true. For a brief moment, Ryan seemed surprised. Most people backed down. Most people avoided conflict. Naomi did neither. She simply stood her ground. The surprise quickly vanished. What replaced it was irritation. Then embarrassment. Then something worse. The lobby grew very still. Outside, rain began tapping softly against the windows. Ryan reached toward Naomi's arm. She stepped back. Please don't touch me. The sentence was calm, reasonable, simple, but it was enough. Everything happened quickly after that. Too quickly. A sharp movement, a burst of anger, a moment nobody expected. The sound echoed through the lobby, not loud, yet somehow impossible to ignore. The room froze. Coffee stopped halfway to a mouth. The receptionist stared. One civilian gasped softly. Ryan himself seemed surprised by what he had just done. Only for a second. Then pride returned to his face, as though admitting wrongdoing would somehow make things worse. Naomi felt heat across her cheek. The sting wasn't what shocked her. What shocked her was the silence. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody stepped forward. For a few long seconds, the entire lobby seemed trapped inside stillness. Naomi slowly raised a hand to her face. Her eyes met Ryan's. He expected shouting, threats, tears. Instead, he found none of those things. She simply looked at him, calmly, carefully, like someone studying a puzzle. Her gaze dropped briefly. Badge number, nameplate, Ryan Holt. She committed both to memory. Then she looked back into his eyes. The confidence in his posture remained, but something flickered beneath it. A tiny uncertainty, as though part of him suddenly wondered whether he had made a mistake. Naomi said nothing. She turned, walked toward the exit, opened the glass door, and stepped back into the cold morning rain. Behind her, the lobby remained silent. Ryan eventually cleared his throat. His partner muttered something. The spell broke. Conversations resumed. People returned to pretending nothing had happened. But across the parking lot, Naomi reached her car and paused beside the driver's door. Rain tapped softly against the leather folder in her hands. She looked back at the building. Not with anger, not with revenge, with something far more dangerous. Understanding. Because in less than 1 minute, she had learned more about Brookdale County than months of reports could ever reveal. She opened the car door and sat inside. The rain continued falling. For several moments, she stared through the windshield at the building. Then she took out a pen. opened her folder, and began writing. Every detail, every face, every word, every second. By the time she finished, the page was nearly full. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere beyond the hills. Inside the car, Naomi closed the folder. Her expression remained unreadable. The question wasn't whether what happened in that lobby would matter. The question was why she seemed completely prepared for it, and what exactly she planned to do next. The answer didn't begin in Brookdale County. It began more than 30 years earlier, hundreds of miles away, on the south side of Chicago. Long before Naomi Carter learned how to remain calm in difficult rooms, she had learned what it felt like to be invisible. The neighborhood where she grew up was a place most politicians only visited during election years. Rows of aging apartment buildings stood shoulder to shoulder beneath tangled power lines. In summer, children played basketball on cracked courts until the streetlights flickered on. In winter, icy wind swept through the narrow streets and rattled loose windows through the night. Naomi's mother worked 2 jobs, one cleaning office buildings downtown, another stocking shelves at a grocery store before sunrise. Most nights, she came home exhausted. Yet somehow she still found energy to help neighbors. If an elderly resident needed groceries, she delivered them. If a single mother needed someone to watch a child for an hour, she volunteered. If a family lost power during a snowstorm, she shared blankets and food. Naomi watched all of it. She never forgot it. Her mother used to tell her something while washing dishes late at night. People remember how you make them feel long after they forget what you gave them. At the time, Naomi didn't fully understand. Years later, those words would shape her entire life. Growing up wasn't easy. There were moments when she felt the weight of other people's assumptions. Teachers who expected less from her. Store employees who followed her through aisles. Strangers who spoke to her as if she weren't intelligent enough to understand. The cuts were small, but they accumulated. One after another. Year after year. By the time Naomi graduated high school, she had learned a lesson many people never have to learn. Some people decide your value before they know your name. The remarkable thing was that she never allowed that lesson to turn into bitterness. She chose something harder: compassion. After college, she began volunteering at community centers, then shelters, then youth programs. The work paid little, sometimes nothing at all. But every day she met people who reminded her of the neighborhood where she'd grown up. People carrying burdens no one else could see. Teenagers trying to avoid gangs. Single parents working impossible schedules. Veterans sleeping in cars. Children pretending everything was fine. Naomi listened. She helped. And then she helped some more. Years passed. The work grew. What began as volunteer hours eventually became nonprofit programs, food drives, emergency housing partnerships, scholarship initiatives, addiction recovery support groups. Most people never heard her name. That was exactly how she liked it. The work mattered more than recognition. One autumn evening, nearly 20 years before the morning at Brookdale, a young man walked into one of Naomi's community programs. His clothes were expensive. His eyes looked exhausted. His hands trembled. Addiction had nearly destroyed his life. Most people saw a wealthy young man wasting opportunities. Naomi saw someone who needed help. She treated him no differently than anyone else. No cameras. No publicity. No special treatment. Just kindness. The young man stayed for months, then eventually rebuilt his life. Years later, Naomi rarely thought about him. To her, he was simply one of many people she'd helped along the way. She never imagined their paths would cross again. Especially not now. Especially not in Brookdale. Back in the present, rain continued falling outside her rental car. Naomi closed the leather folder and started the engine. The sheriff's headquarters disappeared in her rearview mirror. A few minutes later, she arrived at a modest hotel near the edge of town. Nothing fancy. Brick exterior, small lobby, a coffee machine that seemed older than the building itself. The woman at the front desk greeted her warmly. Unlike the people at the sheriff's department, she smiled without suspicion. "Good morning." Naomi smiled back. "Good morning." Sometimes kindness really was that simple. Upstairs, she entered her room and set the folder on a small wooden desk. Only then did she finally look at herself in the mirror. The faint mark on her cheek was becoming visible. She studied it quietly. Not with anger, not with self-pity, with focus. Like someone examining evidence. Her phone vibrated. A text message appeared. One sentence. "Are you still planning to proceed?" No name. No signature. Naomi stared at the message, then locked the screen without replying. She walked toward the window. Outside, Brookdale looked peaceful. Traffic moved through wet streets. A school bus stopped at an intersection. People hurried beneath umbrellas. None of them knew what had happened that morning. None of them knew what was about to happen next. Her thoughts drifted briefly to her mother. She imagined the advice she would have given. Probably something simple. Probably something wise. The same advice she'd given her entire life. Don't let other people decide who you are. Naomi smiled faintly. Then she sat down and opened the folder again. Inside were documents, notes, schedules, appointments. Some pages carried official seals. Others contained handwritten observations. She reviewed every page carefully, methodically. Outside, thunder rolled across the distant sky. Inside the room, she remained calm, the same calm that confused everyone who met her. The same calm Ryan Holt had mistaken for weakness. The truth was much different. Naomi wasn't calm because she didn't feel pain. She was calm because she'd spent decades learning what to do with it. Pain could become anger, pain could become revenge, or pain could become purpose. She had made her choice a long time ago. Another vibration interrupted her thoughts. This time it was a phone call. The screen displayed a number she recognized immediately. For a brief moment, she simply looked at it. Then she answered. "Hello?" A familiar voice greeted her. Warm, professional, concerned. "Naomi, are you all right?" She glanced toward the window. Rain streamed down the glass. "I've had better mornings." The voice sighed. "I heard something happened." Naomi remained silent. The caller continued. "We can discuss alternatives if necessary." For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Naomi looked once more toward the storm gathering above Brookdale. Something in her expression hardened. Not into anger, into determination. The kind that comes from years of fighting difficult battles. The kind that survives disappointment. The kind that refuses to quit. Whatever happened next, she had already made her decision. And by this time tomorrow, the people inside that sheriff's headquarters would learn exactly who Naomi Carter really was. But first, there was one more stop she needed to make. One place she intended to visit before returning downtown. A place where a frightened 12-year-old boy was about to enter her story, and neither of them yet understood how important that meeting would become. The rain had softened to a steady drizzle by the time Naomi left the hotel. Brookdale looked different in the afternoon. The gray skies remained overhead, but the streets had filled with life. Cars splashed through puddles. People hurried beneath umbrellas. A delivery truck backed into an alley behind a bakery, its reverse alarm echoing between brick buildings. Naomi drove slowly through town. She wasn't heading toward another government office. She wasn't meeting lawyers or politicians. Instead, she followed a familiar habit she had developed years ago. Whenever she arrived in a new city, she visited the places where ordinary people gathered. Bus stations, community centers, corner diners, neighborhood parks. Those places often revealed more about a community than official reports ever could. 20 minutes later, she pulled into a small transit station on the east side of town. The building was old, weather-stained concrete, faded benches, a vending machine that looked like it had survived 3 different decades. The station sat between a pawn shop and a closed grocery store. Across the street, a mural painted by local students brightened an otherwise tired block. Naomi parked and stepped out. The air smelled like wet pavement and diesel fuel. She pulled her coat tighter and walked toward the covered waiting area. A handful of people sat scattered along the benches. An elderly man reading a newspaper. A woman speaking quietly into her phone. A young couple sharing earbuds. Then Naomi noticed him. A boy sitting alone near the far end of the shelter. Maybe 12 years old. Thin frame. Oversized hoodie. Worn sneakers. A backpack rested at his feet. His head was lowered. His shoulders were tense. He looked like a child trying very hard not to cry. Naomi slowed her pace. Years of community work had taught her something simple. People often reveal their pain long before they speak about it. The boy stared at the pavement. He didn't notice her approach. Naomi sat on the opposite end of the bench, leaving plenty of space between them. For several moments, she said nothing. The city moved around them. A bus arrived. Passengers stepped off. Others boarded. The doors hissed shut. The bus disappeared down the street. Still, the boy remained motionless. Eventually, Naomi glanced toward the vending machine. "You know," she said gently, "that machine owes me $2. The boy looked up, confused. "What?" Naomi nodded toward the machine. "I bought crackers from it once." "You bought crackers from it once?" "Not this one specifically." The corner of her mouth lifted. "But a machine just like it." The boy stared, unsure whether she was serious. "It took my money." A tiny smile almost appeared. Almost. Naomi noticed. That was enough. "Did you ever get your crackers?" he asked. "No." "That's terrible." It was a difficult time. The boy laughed quietly. The sound surprised even him. For the first time, some of the tension left his face. Naomi extended her hand. "My name's Naomi." "Ethan. It's nice to meet you, Ethan." He nodded, then looked back at the ground. The silence returned. But this time it felt different. Less lonely. A few minutes passed. Then Naomi asked a simple question. "You waiting for someone?" The boy hesitated. "My mom." "She's running late?" His eyes dropped again. "No." Something in his voice made Naomi understand immediately. Not the details, but the weight behind them. "Hospital?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded. The answer came after several seconds. "She's been there 3 days." Naomi listened. Nothing more. Just listened. Many people underestimate how powerful that can be. Eventually the words began coming. Slowly at first, then faster. His mother worked nights at a nursing home. She became sick, ignored it, kept working, then collapsed during a shift. Doctors expected her to recover, but she would be unable to work for weeks, maybe longer. Bills were already piling up. Rent was due soon. His grandmother lived 2 hours away. His father wasn't around. Everything felt uncertain. Everything felt scary. And Ethan was carrying far more fear than a 12-year-old should ever have to carry. When he finally stopped talking, he looked embarrassed. "Sorry." "For what?" "I talked a lot." Naomi smiled. That's what people do when someone listens. The rain continued tapping softly against the shelter roof. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Naomi stood. "You eaten lunch?" Ethan shrugged. That answer told her everything. 10 minutes later, they sat inside a small diner across the street. The place smelled like coffee and fresh bread. A waitress named Linda greeted Naomi by calling everyone honey, regardless of age. Ethan ordered cautiously, like someone worried about cost. Naomi noticed, so she ordered first. 2 sandwiches, soup, pie, hot chocolate. The boy's eyes widened. That's a lot. I know. We can't eat all that. Naomi leaned closer. Then we're going to have to work very hard. For the first time all afternoon, Ethan laughed openly. Outside the diner window, rain streaked down the glass. Inside, warmth filled the room. The food arrived. Steam rose from bowls. Silverware clinked softly against plates. For a little while, Ethan looked like a normal kid again. Not a worried caretaker. Not a frightened son. Just a boy eating lunch. When they finished, Naomi reached into her folder and removed a business card. The card was simple. No fancy title. Just her name and contact information for a nonprofit organization. She slid it across the table. If things get difficult, call this number. Ethan studied the card. Will somebody answer? Yes. What if it's late? Someone will still answer. Really? Really? The seriousness in her voice made him believe her. He carefully tucked the card into his backpack, like it was something valuable. Maybe it was. Outside, the rain finally began easing. Naomi walked Ethan back to the station. A bus approached in the distance. Its headlights glowed through the mist. The boy adjusted his backpack. Thanks for lunch. You're welcome. And the hot chocolate. That too. Ethan smiled. Then something unexpected happened. He hugged her, quickly, awkwardly, the way children do when gratitude arrives before words. Naomi hugged him back. The bus pulled up moments later. Ethan climbed aboard. Before the doors closed, he looked back through the window. Naomi waved. He waved back. Then the bus rolled away. Naomi stood alone beneath the shelter, watching until it disappeared. She never noticed the black luxury SUV parked across the lot, never noticed the man sitting inside, never noticed him lowering a newspaper, or studying her with growing curiosity. The man was in his 60s, silver hair, tailored suit, the kind of presence that attracted attention everywhere he went. William Harrington, billionaire, philanthropist, advisor to some of the most powerful people in the state. He had witnessed the entire interaction. The lunch, the conversation, the kindness. Something about the woman seemed familiar. Very familiar. He couldn't place it. Not yet. But he knew one thing. People rarely behaved that way when they thought nobody important was watching. William continued staring as Naomi walked toward her rental car. A memory tugged at the edge of his mind. An old face. An old building. A difficult chapter from decades earlier. Before he could grasp it, the memory slipped away again. Naomi drove off. William remained parked, watching the empty space where her car had been. Meanwhile, across town, another storm was quietly gathering. Not in the sky. Inside the Brookdale Sheriff's Department, and before the week was over, the paths of Naomi Carter, Ethan, Ryan Holt, Jasmine Reed, and William Harrington would collide in ways none of them could possibly imagine. The rain continued through most of the afternoon. Water streaked across the tall windows of the sheriff's headquarters, while deputies came and went, carrying paperwork, answering calls, and moving through their routines as if nothing unusual had happened, as if a woman hadn't walked into the lobby that morning, as if she hadn't been publicly humiliated, as if nobody had witnessed it. Inside the patrol bullpen, laughter drifted through the room. Ryan Holt leaned back in his chair with the confidence of a man who had never been forced to face consequences. A half-finished cup of coffee sat beside his keyboard. Several deputies gathered nearby. The atmosphere felt casual, comfortable. Ryan was telling the story. Again. She walked in acting like she owned the place. A few people chuckled. One deputy shook his head. What did she want? Ryan shrugged. Who knows? Some people think every government building belongs to them. More laughter. Not loud, Not cruel, almost worse, because it sounded normal, routine, the kind of laughter that grows in places where bad habits stop feeling wrong. Ryan smiled. The story was already changing, the details shifting, the truth becoming something easier to justify. She got confrontational. He took another sip of coffee. I handled it. Handled it. The words floated through the room. Nobody challenged them. Nobody corrected him. Nobody mentioned what they had actually seen. Across the bullpen, Jasmine Reed sat quietly at her desk. She stared at her computer screen, but she wasn't reading anything. Her jaw tightened. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard without moving. 6 years. That was how long she'd worked in Brookdale. 6 years of watching things she wished she hadn't seen. 6 years of convincing herself that staying silent was the smart choice, the safe choice, the necessary choice. Jasmine was one of only a handful of black deputies in the department. She had worked hard to earn her position, harder than most people knew. Long shifts, extra training, endless pressure to prove she belonged. And during those 6 years, she had learned another lesson. People who spoke up often found themselves alone. The deputies who challenged powerful coworkers stopped receiving preferred assignments. Promotions disappeared. Schedules changed. Careers slowed. Nobody openly punished them. It happened quietly, subtly, just enough to send a message. Jasmine knew because she had seen it happen, and because she had spent years making sure it never happened to her. But something about Naomi Carter lingered in her mind. The woman's calm expression, the way she hadn't shouted, hadn't argued, hadn't begged. She had simply looked at Ryan, as though she knew something nobody else did. Jasmine tried returning to work. She couldn't. The image kept returning. Finally, she stood and walked toward the break room. The hallway smelled faintly of old coffee and floor cleaner. Voices echoed from nearby offices. Life continued. Business as usual. Yet the discomfort inside her chest refused to leave. Inside the break room, Jasmine poured herself a cup of coffee. The machine rattled loudly. She stared through a small window overlooking the parking lot. Rain tapped against the glass. A memory surfaced. 3 years earlier, a young man had filed a complaint after a traffic stop. Nothing major, nothing dramatic. At least that's what people said afterward. Jasmine remembered reading the report, then watching it disappear. Weeks later, nobody mentioned it again. The complaint had simply vanished into the system. Another memory followed, then another, little things. Moments that felt wrong. Questions nobody wanted asked. Patterns nobody wanted noticed. She closed her eyes briefly. For the first time in years, those memories no longer felt separate. They felt connected. Back in the bullpen, Ryan's laughter echoed again. Jasmine opened her eyes. Something inside her shifted. Not courage. Not yet. Just doubt. Doubt about how much longer she could keep pretending everything was fine. That evening, long after most civilians had gone home, the building grew quieter. The fluorescent lights seemed harsher after dark. Hallways emptied. Office doors closed. Outside, the storm clouds finally began moving east. Jasmine remained at her desk. The clock on the wall read 7:18 p.m. Most deputies had already left. Ryan was gone. His shift had ended hours earlier. The building felt different without him. Still, uneasy. Jasmine logged into the department's internal records system. She hesitated, then typed a few search terms. Lobby, incident, complaint, date. Nothing. No report. No statement. No documentation. The morning's confrontation officially did not exist. Her stomach tightened. She already knew what she would find. Still, seeing the empty screen made it worse. She stared at it for several seconds, then quietly pulled out her phone. Click. A screenshot. One image. One piece of proof. Nothing more. She saved it, locked her phone, and looked around the room. Nobody had noticed. The silence felt heavy. Across the building, security cameras continued recording, watching empty hallways, closed offices, darkened corners. Jasmine suddenly remembered something. The footage. A chill ran through her. She knew how long the system stored recordings before automatically overwriting them. Everyone knew 48 hours. After that, evidence disappeared, not because anyone necessarily deleted it, because the system erased itself. Convenient. Very convenient. Jasmine stood immediately. Her chair rolled backward. She headed toward the records office. Her footsteps echoed through the nearly empty corridor. The farther she walked, the louder her heartbeat seemed. She wasn't breaking rules, not exactly. But she was doing something she'd avoided for years, paying attention. The records room sat near the rear of the building. A narrow office filled with monitors and servers. The hum of electronics filled the air. Jasmine entered, logged in, pulled up the footage index. The lobby cameras were still there, still stored, still intact. For now. She copied the file locations onto a notepad. Nothing more. Nothing illegal. Just enough information to show them later, if necessary. As she finished writing, a voice behind her nearly made her jump. "Working late?" Jasmine turned. Sergeant Bill Turner stood in the doorway. Older, friendly, the kind of supervisor who avoided conflict whenever possible. Jasmine forced a smile. "Just finishing paperwork." Turner nodded. "Don't stay too late." Then he walked away. The moment passed, but Jasmine's pulse took several minutes to settle. When she finally left the records room, she carried only a small piece of paper. Nothing important to anyone else. Everything important to her. Outside, the parking lot glistened beneath streetlights. Rainwater reflected yellow pools of light. Jasmine sat in her car for a long time before starting the engine. Her phone rested in the passenger seat. The screenshot remained saved. The notes remained hidden in her pocket. For years, she had convinced herself that silence was survival. Tonight, that belief felt weaker than ever. Meanwhile, across town, Naomi Carter sat alone in her hotel room. The leather folder rested open on the desk. Notes carefully organized. Observations recorded. Plans moving quietly forward. A lamp cast warm light across the room. Beyond the window, Brookdale shimmered beneath wet streets and fading storm clouds. Her phone remained nearby. Waiting. The city was settling into evening. Most people believed the day was over. They were wrong. Because somewhere in Brookdale, pieces were already moving into place. A frightened boy. A woman carrying decades of quiet kindness. A deputy wrestling with her conscience. A billionaire haunted by an old memory. And a man named Ryan Holt, who still believed the worst thing that happened that morning was a minor inconvenience. He had no idea how much trouble was already headed his way. And by tomorrow, the first phone call would change everything. The town of Brookdale settled into darkness beneath a blanket of low clouds. Streetlights reflected on rain-soaked pavement. Neon signs flickered outside restaurants and gas stations. A freight train rolled slowly through the edge of town, its distant horn echoing through the night. Most people were finishing dinner, watching television, preparing for another ordinary Tuesday. But nothing about the next 24 hours would be ordinary. Inside her hotel room, Naomi Carter sat alone at the small wooden desk. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioner. A lamp cast a warm circle of light across the surface of the desk. The leather folder remained open. Pages neatly organized. Notes carefully written. Every observation from the day had been recorded. The lobby, the witnesses, the exact time, the exact location, the exact words she remembered hearing. Naomi had spent decades documenting facts. Experience taught her that memories fade, evidence does not. She reached up and gently touched her cheek. The faint redness remained visible, not dramatic, not severe, but enough to remind her of the morning. For a moment, she closed her eyes. Not because she was overwhelmed, because she was tired. The kind of tiredness that settles deep inside a person after years of carrying responsibility. Her thoughts drifted back to Chicago, to her mother, to long nights spent helping neighbors when there was barely enough for themselves. She remembered something her mother once said after being treated unfairly at work. People had expected anger. Instead, her mother simply came home and made dinner. When Naomi asked why she wasn't furious, her mother smiled. Anger burns fast. Purpose lasts longer. At the time, Naomi had been too young to understand. Now she understood perfectly. A vibration pulled her back to the present. Her phone lit up. The same number. The same person who had contacted her earlier. Naomi answered immediately. "Hello?" The voice on the other end sounded relieved. Thank goodness. A brief silence followed. Then the voice continued. "I've been worried about you all afternoon." Naomi leaned back in her chair. "I'm all right." "Are you sure?" A faint smile crossed her face. "No." The honesty surprised both of them. The caller chuckled softly. "You've never been very good at pretending." "No." The voice became serious. "We can still stop this." Naomi looked toward the rain-speckled window. The town glowed softly beneath the darkness. "No. You don't have to prove anything. That's not what this is about." The caller sighed. Then came the question both of them had been avoiding. What exactly happened in that lobby? Naomi told the story, not dramatically, not emotionally, simply the facts. A woman entering a public building, a deputy making assumptions, an interaction escalating unnecessarily, a room full of people choosing silence. The voice listened carefully, never interrupting. When Naomi finished, the room became quiet. Finally, the caller spoke. "That's worse than I expected." Naomi didn't answer, because she knew something the caller did not. What happened wasn't the most important part. The reaction afterward was the laughter, the missing report, the silence. Those things revealed far more than a single bad moment. "They showed me exactly what I needed to see," Naomi said. The caller understood immediately. "You've made your decision." "Yes." Another pause. Longer this time. Then the question arrived. The one that mattered. "Do you want tomorrow canceled?" Outside, lightning flashed somewhere beyond the horizon. The room brightened for a brief second. Then darkness returned. Naomi's answer came without hesitation. "No." The caller waited. Naomi continued. "Tomorrow goes forward exactly as planned." The words settled heavily between them. Final? Certain. The voice on the other end exhaled slowly. "Then I'll notify everyone. Thank you. They're not going to be happy." Naomi almost laughed. "I don't imagine they will." The caller's tone softened. "You know what happens after tomorrow." "I do." Everything changes. Naomi looked down at the folder. The notes, the observations, the evidence, the truth. That's the point. After a few more minutes, the call ended. The room became quiet once again. Naomi set her phone aside, then opened the folder one more time. Near the back sat a sealed envelope. Official, confidential, untouched. She stared at it for several seconds. Tomorrow morning, that envelope would no longer be secret. Tomorrow morning, an entire department would learn exactly why she had come to Brookdale. And tomorrow morning, one deputy's life would begin changing in ways he could never predict. Across town, Ryan Holt sat at his kitchen table. A football game played on television. His dinner sat half-finished in front of him. His wife glanced up from her phone. "Long day?" Ryan shrugged. "The usual?" "The usual?" He took a drink. "Just dealing with people." His wife smiled. "That's your job." Ryan laughed. "Unfortunately." The conversation moved on. Neither of them thought about the woman from the lobby, at least not for long. To Ryan, she was already becoming a forgotten memory. Just another face, just another day. He had no reason to think otherwise, because for years nothing ever happened. Complaints disappeared, problems faded, consequences never arrived. Why would tomorrow be different? Upstairs, he eventually went to bed. Within minutes, he was asleep. Peacefully, comfortably, completely unaware of what was waiting for him in the morning. Elsewhere in Brookdale, Jasmine Reed sat in her apartment. The screenshot remained open on her phone. She stared at it while a television played quietly in the background. An empty incident log, a missing report. Proof that something wasn't right. Several times she considered deleting it. Several times she almost did. But each time she stopped herself. The image remained. The longer she looked at it, the more impossible it became to ignore. For the first time in 6 years, Jasmine felt something stronger than fear. Responsibility. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Ethan sat beside his mother's hospital bed. The room was dim. Machines beeped softly. His mother slept peacefully. For the first time in days, Ethan felt hopeful. The business card Naomi had given him rested safely inside his backpack. He checked twice before leaving the room, just to make sure it was still there. He didn't know why. Something about it felt important. Outside the hospital, a black luxury SUV pulled away from the curb. William Harrington sat in the back seat reviewing documents. But every few minutes his thoughts drifted back to the bus station, to the woman who bought lunch for a frightened child, to the strange feeling of recognition he couldn't explain. Finally, he closed the folder in his lap. The memory refused to leave. He had seen that face before. Years ago, somewhere, somehow. The answer lingered just beyond reach, and by sunrise, William would finally remember. Back at the hotel, Naomi stood by the window one last time. The rain had stopped. Clouds were beginning to break apart. Moonlight appeared between them, a sign of better weather. Tomorrow would be clear. She found that fitting. Because by this time tomorrow, there would be no more shadows, no more uncertainty, no more hidden identities. The truth was coming, and it was coming fast. Before going to bed, Naomi looked once more at the sealed envelope on her desk. Then she turned off the lamp. Darkness filled the room. Outside, Brookdale slept peacefully. Inside the sheriff's department, an email was already being prepared. A message that would arrive before dawn. A message that would summon every deputy, supervisor, and employee to a mandatory assembly. A message that nobody would understand. Not yet. But when the doors opened at 8 o'clock the next morning, everything Ryan Holt believed about power, status, and consequence would be shattered by a single sentence. And it would begin with 2 simple words. Good morning. The sun rose over Brookdale beneath a sky that looked completely different from the day before. The storm was gone. The clouds had scattered. Golden light spilled across rooftops and wet streets still shining from the night's rain. People stepped out of their homes expecting an ordinary Tuesday. Inside the Brookdale Sheriff's Department, nobody expected what was coming. At 6:07 a.m., an email arrived in every department inbox. Mandatory all-hands assembly. Attendance required. 8 a.m. No exceptions. No explanation. No agenda. No details. Within minutes, speculation spread through the building. Some guessed it was a budget announcement. Others expected policy changes. A few worried about state audits. Nobody knew the truth. By 7:30, deputies filled the hallways carrying coffee cups and rumors. The building buzzed with nervous energy. Ryan Holt walked through the front doors looking more annoyed than concerned. He glanced at the email on his phone and rolled his eyes. "Another meeting," he muttered. A deputy beside him laughed. "Maybe they're finally giving us raises." Ryan snorted. "Not a chance." The two disappeared into the locker room. Across the building, Jasmine Reed sat quietly at her desk. Unlike everyone else, she felt a strange tension she couldn't explain. The screenshot still existed on her phone. The saved information about the lobby footage remained folded inside her notebook. For some reason, she couldn't shake the feeling that today mattered. The feeling had followed her since the moment Naomi Carter walked through the lobby. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of town, Naomi stood in front of a hotel mirror. The simple coat from yesterday was gone. So were the plain clothes. Today she wore a dark navy suit tailored with quiet elegance. Professional, confident, unmistakably official. The leather folder rested beside her on the bed. Inside sat documents that would soon change the course of several lives. She took a slow breath, then picked up the folder and left the room. At exactly 7:55 a.m., the briefing room inside the sheriff's headquarters was nearly full. Rows of metal chairs stretched across the floor. Deputies, supervisors, administrative staff, detectives, everyone waited. Conversations bounced around the room. Coffee cups steamed beneath fluorescent lights. Ryan sat near the middle, relaxed, comfortable. His feet stretched forward. His posture radiated confidence. The woman from yesterday hadn't crossed his mind once that morning. Why would she? As far as he knew, the situation was over. Finished. Forgotten. At the front of the room stood an empty podium. Beside it sat a reserved chair. Nobody knew who it was for. The clock reached 8 o'clock. The room quieted slightly. Then the side doors opened. Governor Eleanor Whitmore entered the room. Instantly, every conversation stopped. People straightened in their seats. Several deputies exchanged confused looks. The governor rarely appeared in person. Certainly not for routine meetings. Whitmore walked confidently toward the podium. 2 staff members followed behind her. She carried a folder beneath one arm. No smile, no small talk. Just purpose. The atmosphere changed immediately. Even Ryan sat up. The governor placed her folder on the podium and surveyed the room. 60 faces stared back at her. The silence became absolute. "Thank you for being here." Her voice echoed clearly through the room. As many of you know, the state has spent the last 2 years reviewing public trust and accountability initiatives across multiple counties. A few people nodded. Most remained confused. Whitmore continued. Brookdale County has been selected as one of the most important sites in that effort. The room grew even quieter. Ryan glanced toward a colleague. Nobody understood where this was going. The governor paused, then spoke carefully. "For the past several months, my office has conducted a national search for someone capable of leading the next phase of that initiative." She opened her folder. Someone with decades of experience serving communities. A few heads turned. Someone with a proven record of integrity. More silence. Someone who understands accountability not as punishment, but as responsibility. Ryan shifted slightly in his chair. A strange feeling settled into his stomach. Nothing specific, just discomfort. The governor looked toward the rear entrance. Then she smiled. For the first time all morning. The smile was warm, respectful, almost personal. And then she spoke the words that would change everything. "Good morning, ma'am." Every head in the room turned. The rear door opened. A woman stepped inside. At first, nobody reacted. Then recognition spread like electricity. One face, one heartbeat, one realization after another. The woman walked calmly down the center aisle carrying a worn leather folder. Naomi Carter, the same woman from the lobby, the same woman Ryan Holt had confronted, the same woman he believed didn't belong there. Now every eye in the room followed her. Her posture was steady, her expression calm. She didn't appear angry. She didn't appear nervous. She simply walked forward. Ryan stopped breathing. For a moment, his brain refused to accept what he was seeing. The room seemed to tilt around him. His pulse thundered in his ears. No. No, that wasn't possible. Yet there she was, the woman from yesterday, walking directly toward the governor. Several deputies stared openly. Others looked back and forth between Naomi and Ryan. Whispers began spreading through the room. Small, confused, uneasy. Jasmine Reed felt her heart racing. She recognized Naomi immediately. But unlike Ryan, Jasmine wasn't afraid. She was stunned. Naomi reached the front of the room. The governor stepped aside, then extended her hand. Not casually, not formally, respectfully. Naomi shook it. The room fell completely silent. Governor Whitmore turned back toward the audience. I would like to introduce the newly appointed director of the statewide Public Accountability Initiative. The words hit the room like a shockwave. Ryan felt every ounce of color leave his face. Whitmore continued. Over the past 20 years, this woman has helped build some of the most successful community trust programs in the state. Naomi stood quietly beside her. She has advised cities, nonprofit organizations, educational institutions, and public agencies. Ryan's hands tightened around the arms of his chair. The governor wasn't finished. And beginning today, she will oversee accountability reviews and reform initiatives affecting law enforcement agencies throughout this state. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The room seemed frozen. Then came the final sentence. The woman standing beside me is Naomi Carter. Silence. Pure silence. Ryan stared at Naomi. Yesterday, he had looked at her and seen someone powerless, someone insignificant, someone he could dismiss. Now the entire room was standing in honor of her appointment. Every assumption he made 24 hours earlier collapsed at once. Naomi finally stepped toward the podium. The leather folder remained tucked beneath one arm. Her eyes moved across the audience. She recognized faces from the lobby. The receptionist. Several deputies. Ryan. Jasmine. She didn't linger on any of them. Not yet. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, measured, strong. I appreciate the governor's confidence. No anger, no bitterness, nothing dramatic. That somehow made the moment even more powerful. I came to Brookdale because accountability begins with truth. The room listened carefully. Truth isn't always comfortable. A few people shifted uneasily. Sometimes the most important thing we learn about an organization happens when nobody believes they're being observed. Ryan felt his stomach drop. Several deputies looked directly at him. Others suddenly remembered yesterday. The lobby, the confrontation, the silence. Every detail returned. Naomi paused. The room remained absolutely still. Then she said something that sent a chill through every person present. Yesterday, I learned a great deal about Brookdale County. And for the first time since that morning in the lobby, Ryan Holt understood something terrifying. Naomi Carter had never walked into that building by accident. She had come there for a reason. And whatever happened next was only beginning. The silence inside the briefing room seemed to stretch forever. No one moved. No one coughed. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights felt louder than before. Naomi Carter stood calmly at the front of the room, while 60 pairs of eyes remained fixed on her. For most of the people in that room, the shock came from learning who she was. For Ryan Holt, the shock came from realizing who she had always been. The woman he had dismissed. The woman he had judged. The woman he had humiliated. She hadn't changed overnight. The only thing that had changed was what he knew. Governor Whitmore stepped back from the podium and allowed Naomi to continue. Naomi rested the leather folder on the podium. Her hands were steady. Her voice remained calm. I know many of you have questions. The statement drew a few uneasy glances around the room. Some of you are probably wondering why I arrived in Brookdale without any formal introduction. Nobody answered. Nobody needed to. The question hung in the air. Naomi nodded slightly. The answer is simple. She paused, because I needed to see the truth. The room grew even quieter. A prepared visit shows you what people want you to see. Her eyes moved slowly across the audience. A real visit shows you who people are. Ryan felt his throat tighten. Several deputies lowered their eyes. Others sat perfectly still. Naomi continued. The statewide Public Accountability Initiative was created because communities across this state have asked an important question. She opened the folder. Can trust be rebuilt? The words seemed to settle over the room, not through slogans. She turned a page, not through public relations campaigns. Another page, and not through promises. Then she looked directly at the audience. Trust is rebuilt through behavior. No one spoke. No one interrupted. The room was completely hers. Governor Whitmore watched proudly from the side. Naomi had spent her life speaking in difficult rooms. She knew how to command attention without raising her voice. I wasn't sent here to punish anyone. That surprised some people. Ryan looked up. Naomi noticed. But I was sent here to learn the truth. Her gaze lingered briefly on him before moving on. The moment lasted less than a second. Yet Ryan felt exposed, like someone had turned a spotlight toward him. Naomi closed the folder. Then came the revelation. The Brookdale visit was intentionally confidential. A ripple moved through the audience. Several supervisors exchanged glances. Confidential? Naomi nodded. Only a very small number of people knew I would be arriving. Now even more people looked confused. She continued. The purpose was to observe how ordinary citizens are treated when no one believes they are being watched. The room froze. The meaning became clear instantly. Yesterday wasn't an accident. Yesterday had been a test, and Brookdale had failed. Ryan's stomach dropped. Hard. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. Every second of the previous morning replayed itself in brutal clarity. The lobby, the assumptions, the confrontation, the humiliation. The moment he believed he was in control. Now it all looked different. Much different. He wasn't evaluating Naomi. She had been evaluating him. Across the room, Jasmine Reed felt a strange mixture of emotions. Shock, relief, hope. For years, she had watched problems disappear into silence. Now someone had finally arrived who seemed willing to look directly at them. Governor Whitmore stepped forward again. Director Carter has spent more than 2 decades helping communities rebuild relationships between citizens and institutions. The governor's voice carried authority. But her work only succeeds when people are willing to be honest. The word honest seemed to linger. Some deputies shifted in their seats. Others remained motionless. Ryan stared at the floor. Naomi spoke again. Over the coming weeks, our office will conduct a comprehensive review. The room stiffened. Procedures. A page turned. Community complaints. Another page. Accountability systems. The final page. And organizational culture. That last phrase hit harder than all the others. Because culture wasn't paperwork. Culture wasn't policy. Culture was people. Culture was what happened when nobody important was watching. Culture was yesterday morning. The governor glanced toward Naomi. A silent signal. The next part belonged to her. Naomi took a breath, then said something nobody expected. Every person in this room deserves the opportunity to do the right thing. Several heads lifted. Ryan looked up. So I'm going to ask for cooperation. Her tone remained calm. Professional, not threatening. Because this review isn't about destroying careers. A few shoulders visibly relaxed. It's about understanding the truth. The room listened carefully, and the truth helps everyone. For a brief moment, the tension eased. Then Naomi added one final sentence. The review begins immediately. The tension returned, stronger than before. The meeting ended 20 minutes later. No applause, no celebration, just silence. The kind of silence that follows an earthquake. People stood slowly. Conversations began in whispers. Nobody seemed sure what to say. The room emptied in small groups. Ryan remained seated longer than most. His hands felt cold. His thoughts raced. This can't be happening. It wasn't just embarrassment anymore. It was fear. Real fear. Because the more he thought about yesterday, the worse it looked. He finally stood and walked into the hallway. Deputies were already talking, quietly, carefully. Some avoided eye contact. Others glanced at him before looking away. For the first time in years, Ryan felt uncertainty. He hated it. At the far end of the corridor, Jasmine Reed watched him pass. Their eyes met briefly. Ryan looked away first. That had never happened before. Meanwhile, Naomi followed Governor Whitmore into a private conference room. The moment the door closed, the governor exhaled. That went about as expected. Naomi smiled faintly. I think a few people were surprised. A few? They both laughed softly. The first genuine laugh Naomi had experienced since arriving in Brookdale. Then the governor's expression became serious. What do you think? Naomi looked through the glass wall toward the hallway outside. Deputies moved past. Conversations continued. Pieces of a much larger story. I think the problems go deeper than one incident. Governor Whitmore nodded. She had expected that answer. And the deputy? Naomi knew exactly who she meant. Ryan Holt. For a moment she considered the question, then answered carefully. I think yesterday revealed a symptom. The governor leaned back. And the disease? Naomi looked toward the busy hallway again. The silence. The answer lingered between them. Because silence had been everywhere. In the lobby, behind desks, inside offices. People had seen. People had heard. Yet almost nobody acted. That worried Naomi more than one deputy ever could. A knock interrupted the conversation. One of the governor's staff members stepped inside. Director Carter? Yes? The staff member handed her a folder. These just arrived. Naomi opened it. Inside were preliminary records from Brookdale. Complaints. Performance reports. Internal reviews. She scanned the first page, then the second, then the third. Her expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough for the governor to notice. What is it? Naomi closed the folder slowly. I think we need to start sooner than expected. The governor raised an eyebrow. What did you find? Naomi looked down at the documents. The numbers weren't alarming by themselves, but together they painted a picture. Missing reports, repeated complaints, patterns. Small signs that something wasn't right. Not proof, not yet. But enough to raise serious questions. Outside the conference room, the sheriff's department continued operating normally. Phones rang, printers hummed, Deputies answered calls. The building looked exactly the same as it had 24 hours earlier. Yet everything had changed, because for the first time, someone was paying attention. And somewhere else in Brookdale, another piece of the puzzle was about to emerge. A piece connected to a frightened boy, a hospital room, and a recording nobody yet realized existed. By the end of the week, that recording would become one of the most important pieces of evidence in the entire investigation. And when it finally surfaced, the truth would become impossible to ignore. The announcement changed everything. Not overnight, not dramatically, but quietly, like the first crack in a dam. By Wednesday morning, Brookdale County Sheriff's Department looked exactly the same from the outside. The same brick building, the same patrol cars parked along the curb, the same American flag moving gently above the entrance. Yet inside something had shifted. People were watching their words more carefully. Conversations stopped when certain people entered rooms. Whispers traveled through hallways. Rumors multiplied. No one knew exactly what Director Naomi Carter would uncover. But everyone understood one thing. The old way of doing things was under a microscope, and some people were far more nervous than others. Ryan Holt barely slept Tuesday night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the briefing room, the governor, the introduction, Naomi Carter walking down the aisle. The memory replayed endlessly. At work, he tried convincing himself everything would be fine. People made mistakes. People moved on. Nothing had officially happened yet. No investigation had contacted him. No supervisor had called him into an office. No disciplinary notice had arrived. Yet the anxiety remained, because deep down, he knew something. The problem wasn't what he did. The problem was what other people might have seen. Across the building, Naomi sat inside a temporary office established for the review team. Morning sunlight spilled through large windows. Stacks of files covered the conference table. Citizen complaints, internal reports, performance evaluations. For 2 days, she reviewed them carefully. The numbers told stories. Not complete stories, but enough to reveal patterns. Certain names appeared repeatedly. Certain complaints vanished unusually quickly. Certain investigations seemed to end before they truly began. She highlighted sections, made notes, asked questions. And with every page, the picture became clearer. By Wednesday afternoon, she made a decision. The review would move into a formal investigative phase. She picked up the phone. "I need an independent investigator assigned immediately." The request traveled through state channels. The approval came faster than expected. By Thursday morning, the process was officially underway. Meanwhile, another decision was being made elsewhere. One much harder. Jasmine Reed sat alone in her patrol car during her lunch break. The screenshot remained on her phone. The notes about the lobby footage stayed folded inside her notebook. For 3 nights, she had barely slept. Every time she considered speaking up, fear returned. Fear of retaliation, fear of isolation, fear of becoming the next target. Yet another feeling had begun growing stronger. Guilt. The memory of Naomi standing alone in that lobby haunted her. The memory of everyone watching. The memory of doing nothing. Jasmine stared through the windshield. Traffic moved slowly along Main Street. People carried groceries. Children crossed intersections. Life continued. Ordinary. Unaware. She thought about the 6 years she'd spent protecting her career. Then she thought about the woman who walked into Brookdale and told the truth after only 1 day. The comparison hurt. Finally, Jasmine reached for her phone. Her hands trembled slightly. She opened a contact form connected to the state review office. Then she typed 3 words. "I need to talk." She stared at the message. For several seconds, she nearly deleted it. Then she pressed send. The message disappeared. The moment passed. Yet somehow everything felt different afterward, as though a weight had shifted, as though silence had finally loosened its grip. Across town, Ethan sat beside his mother's hospital bed. Wednesday sunlight filled the room. His mother looked stronger than she had days earlier. Color had returned to her face. The doctors were optimistic. For the first time all week, Ethan smiled more than he worried. He pulled the business card Naomi had given him from his backpack. He had looked at it every day. The card represented something simple. Hope. His mother noticed. "Who's Naomi?" Ethan smiled. "The nicest person I ever met at a bus station." His mother laughed softly. "That sounds very specific." "It is." Then he told her the story. The lunch, the conversation, the hot chocolate, the card. Everything. His mother listened carefully. When he finished, she seemed thoughtful. "I'd like to thank her someday." Ethan nodded. So would I. Neither of them realized how soon that opportunity would arrive, or that they were already connected to something much larger. Thursday afternoon brought another development. An investigator from the State Review Office arrived in Brookdale. His name was Marcus Bennett, 58 years old, former prosecutor, known for being methodical, patient, impossible to intimidate. Marcus met with Naomi privately. The two spent hours reviewing documents, patterns, timelines, complaints, witnesses. When the meeting ended, Marcus leaned back in his chair. "I think your instincts were right." Naomi nodded. "So do I." Marcus tapped one particular file. "What concerns me isn't one incident." He looked up. "It's the culture surrounding it." Naomi recognized the word immediately. Culture. The same word she had spoken during the assembly. The same problem she suspected from the beginning. A culture where people stopped asking questions. A culture where silence became normal. A culture where accountability slowly disappeared. Marcus closed the folder. "Let's start with witnesses." Naomi agreed. The interviews began the next morning. Some employees remembered little. Others remembered more. Most seemed nervous. Several avoided direct answers. But one interview changed everything. Jasmine Reed walked into the conference room shortly after 10 o'clock. She carried a small notebook. Nothing else. Marcus greeted her politely. Naomi was not present. By design, the process needed independence. Jasmine sat down, her hands folded tightly together. For a moment, she said nothing. Marcus waited, patiently. Finally, she spoke. "I saw what happened." The words felt small, yet they changed everything. For nearly 2 hours, Jasmine answered questions, carefully, honestly. She described the lobby, the confrontation, the silence afterward, the missing report, the screenshot, the saved footage information, every detail. When she finished, Marcus thanked her, then asked one final question. "Why speak now?" Jasmine stared at the table. The answer came quietly. "Because I'm tired of pretending I don't see things." The room became silent. Marcus nodded. He understood. That afternoon, another witness unexpectedly appeared. Not inside the sheriff's department. Inside Brookdale Memorial Hospital. Ethan's mother had finally regained enough strength to sort through her belongings. Her purse, her phone, messages, photos, voicemails. Simple things neglected during days of treatment. While reviewing files on her phone, she noticed something unusual. A video. Only a few minutes long. Recorded Monday morning, before her hospitalization, before everything changed. She frowned, confused, then pressed play. The footage wasn't intentional. The camera had been activated accidentally while she sat waiting near the sheriff's building that morning. The image quality was poor. The phone had remained inside her purse. Most of the screen showed darkness. But the audio was clear, very clear. Voices, Footsteps. A confrontation. A woman calmly explaining she belonged there. A deputy refusing to listen. Then silence. Then words. Words that sounded far worse than anyone imagined. The woman's eyes widened. She replayed the recording, then replayed it again. By the third time, she realized something important. She knew that voice. Not personally, but recently. Very recently. The same woman Ethan had described. Naomi. A chill moved through her. She immediately called her son. And before the day ended, a message would be sent to the review team. A message containing a recording nobody knew existed. A recording capable of turning suspicion into proof. And once Marcus Bennett listened to it, the investigation would never be the same again. The file arrived late Friday afternoon. Outside, Brookdale was settling into another quiet evening. The sun hung low above the horizon, casting long golden shadows across storefront windows and empty parking lots. Inside the temporary review office, Marcus Bennett sat alone at a conference table covered with folders. The building had grown quiet. Most employees had already gone home. Only a handful of lights remained on throughout the sheriff's headquarters. Marcus opened the email. Attached was a short audio file. Nothing about it looked remarkable. No official label. No special markings. Just a recording accidentally captured by a woman sitting near the lobby on Monday morning. The kind of file that might have been deleted without a second thought. Instead, it had found its way to him. Marcus slipped on a pair of headphones. Pressed play. For several seconds, he heard only background noise. Footsteps, doors opening, distant voices. Then the conversation began. A woman speaking calmly, respectfully, a deputy responding. The tone shifted. The tension increased. Marcus listened carefully. Every word, every pause, every change in voice. By the time the recording ended, he remained completely still. Then he replayed it. Again. And again. Each time he noticed something new. Not because the language itself was shocking, but because it confirmed a pattern, a mindset, a behavior. Something much larger than a single incident. The recording matched witness statements. It matched Naomi's notes. It matched Jasmine's concerns. Most importantly, it matched the culture Marcus had begun uncovering throughout the week. He removed the headphones slowly. The room felt heavier now. The evidence was no longer pointing in one direction. It was converging. The pieces were beginning to fit together. He immediately called Naomi. She answered on the second ring. "You listened to it." Marcus almost smiled. "You know me too well." Silence. Then Naomi asked the only question that mattered. "What did it tell you?" Marcus looked through the conference room window toward the dark hallway outside. "It told me this isn't about one bad decision." Naomi understood immediately, because she had reached the same conclusion days earlier. It's systemic. Yes. The word lingered. Neither of them liked it. Because systemic problems were always harder to solve, harder to confront, harder to repair. Yet now they had no choice. After ending the call, Marcus returned to the files. He began reviewing old complaints again, this time with a different perspective, not looking for isolated incidents, looking for patterns. And once he started looking, he found them everywhere. 3 years earlier, a complaint dismissed within 48 hours. 2 years earlier, another investigation closed without interviews. 18 months earlier, a citizen report marked incomplete and quietly archived. Each case seemed insignificant by itself. Together they formed a trail leading towards something nobody inside the department wanted discussed. Meanwhile, Ryan Holt spent Friday evening trying to convince himself everything would work out. He sat alone on the back porch of his home. A half-finished drink rested beside him. Crickets chirped in the darkness. The neighborhood felt peaceful, but peace never reached him. Not anymore. Every conversation at work now felt different. People spoke more carefully. Supervisors appeared more cautious. Several coworkers who once laughed at his jokes now avoided eye contact. The change was subtle, yet impossible to ignore. Ryan hated it. For years he had moved through the department with confidence. Now uncertainty followed him everywhere. His phone buzzed. A text from another deputy. "You hear they're reopening old complaints?" Ryan stared at the screen. His stomach tightened. He typed a response. "Rumors," then deleted it. Because he wasn't sure anymore. The truth was, he had heard the same rumor, more than once, and every time he heard it, the fear returned. Across town, Jasmine Reed sat at her kitchen table reviewing old memories. Not photographs, not documents. Memories, faces, names, conversations she wished she had challenged years earlier. The more she reflected, the more she realized something painful. Silence had never protected anyone. Not really. It had only delayed consequences, including her own. For the first time in years, Jasmine felt lighter. Not because the situation was improving, because she had finally stopped carrying it alone. Elsewhere in Brookdale, Ethan's mother was discharged from the hospital. The doctors were pleased with her recovery. The road ahead would take time. But she was healing. As Ethan helped her into the car, she smiled for the first time in days. "You know who we need to thank?" Ethan grinned. "Naomi." His mother nodded. "Definitely Naomi." The business card remained tucked safely inside his wallet. The card had become a symbol of something unexpected, kindness arriving exactly when they needed it. Neither of them knew how closely their story had become connected to hers. Not yet. Saturday morning arrived bright and clear. No rain, no clouds. Just blue skies stretching over Brookdale County. The weather felt almost symbolic, as if the town itself was slowly emerging from a storm. At 10 o'clock, Naomi received a visitor. The receptionist called her office. "There's someone here asking for you." Naomi looked up from her paperwork. "Who is it?" The receptionist hesitated. "A Mr. William Harrington." Naomi froze. Just briefly. The name felt familiar. Very familiar. A moment later, William entered the room. Tall, silver-haired, elegant without being flashy. The years had changed him, but not enough. The instant Naomi saw his face, she remembered. Not the billionaire, not the advisor, not the public figure. She remembered a frightened young man sitting in a recovery group 20 years earlier. A young man trying desperately to rebuild his life. William smiled. "So it is you." Naomi stood, surprised. Genuinely surprised. "William." He laughed softly. "I've been trying to find you for years." The room fell quiet. Outside the window, sunlight reflected from parked cars. Inside, two people stood separated by decades of history. History neither had expected to revisit. William shook his head in disbelief. "Do you have any idea how many times I wondered where you went?" Naomi smiled. "I was busy." That answer made him laugh even harder, because it was exactly the answer he expected. For the next hour they talked, about old neighborhoods, old programs, old struggles. William told her about his younger brother, the recovery, the second chance, the life that followed. Naomi listened quietly, as she always had. Eventually, William became serious. "You never took credit." Naomi looked confused. "For what?" "For saving him." She shook her head immediately. "I didn't save anyone." William leaned forward. "That's where you're wrong." His voice softened. "You gave him a chance when nobody else would." The room became still. Outside, a breeze moved through nearby trees. For a moment, neither spoke. Then William said something unexpected. "I watched you at the bus station." Naomi blinked. "The boy?" William nodded. "I saw everything." Now it was Naomi's turn to laugh. "I hope you enjoyed the world's most expensive grilled cheese sandwich." William smiled. Then his expression changed. More thoughtful. More emotional. "You haven't changed." The words landed softly, yet they carried enormous weight. Because William had spent decades around powerful people, influential people, famous people. Many changed. Few stayed the same. Naomi Carter remained exactly who she had always been. The realization affected him more than he expected. By the time William left, one thing had become clear. His appearance in Brookdale was no coincidence, and before this story ended, his connection to Naomi would become public. Very public. Back at the sheriff's department, Marcus Bennett continued digging deeper. Every hour brought new information, new witnesses, new questions, new concerns. The investigation was gaining momentum, and for the first time, several people inside the department began worrying about where it might lead. Because when truth starts moving, it rarely stops, and the empire built on silence was beginning to crack. Monday morning arrived with an energy Brookdale had never felt before. The investigation had become impossible to ignore. What began as quiet questions was now generating conversations throughout the county. Not public conversations, not yet, but inside offices, inside conference rooms, inside patrol cars parked beneath shade trees during lunch breaks. People were talking, and when people started talking, old stories had a way of finding daylight. Inside the review office, Marcus Bennett sat surrounded by witness statements. The stack had grown significantly over the weekend. Names continued appearing. Former complaints resurfaced. Old incidents suddenly seemed important again. Each new testimony strengthened the same conclusion. The problem was never one deputy. The problem was a culture that allowed certain behaviors to survive. Marcus had seen similar patterns before, not often, but enough to recognize them. The investigation was now moving faster than anyone expected, and Ryan Holt felt every bit of it. He walked through the sheriff's headquarters that morning, noticing something different. The conversations stopped when he approached. People became careful, guarded. Several coworkers who once greeted him warmly now offered only brief nods. No accusations, no confrontations, just distance. The kind of distance people create when uncertainty enters a room. Ryan hated it. He hated not knowing. He hated waiting. Most of all, he hated the feeling that events were unfolding beyond his control. Meanwhile, Naomi Carter was sitting in a conference room with Governor Whitmore. Large windows overlooked downtown Brookdale. Morning sunlight filled the space. Coffee cups sat untouched between stacks of reports. The governor was reviewing updates from the investigation. The deeper she read, the more troubled she became. Finally, she set the documents down. "This is bigger than we thought." Naomi nodded. "I know." The governor looked toward her. "Do you regret coming here alone?" Naomi smiled faintly. "No." The answer came without hesitation. Whitmore wasn't surprised. Naomi had always been that way. Strong without appearing strong. Determined without needing attention. The governor leaned back in her chair. "You know something I've never understood?" Naomi raised an eyebrow. "What?" Whitmore smiled. "You've spent your entire life helping people." "That's true. You've changed countless lives." Naomi shrugged. "Maybe a few." The governor laughed softly. "See? That's exactly what I mean." Naomi looked confused. "You never keep score." The room became quiet, because the statement was true. Naomi rarely remembered the people she'd helped, not because they weren't important, because she never viewed kindness as a transaction. You helped because someone needed help, Then you moved forward. Simple. At least to her. The governor glanced toward another folder. A new name sat highlighted on top. William Harrington, one of the most recognizable philanthropists in the state. The governor knew him well. Everyone did. Yet she still found the timing curious. He requested a meeting. Naomi looked up. William? The governor nodded. Apparently, he's very interested in this case. Naomi smiled. You could say that. Whitmore noticed the smile, then noticed something else. Recognition. How exactly do you know William Harrington? Naomi laughed quietly. That's a long story. The governor leaned forward. We have time. And so Naomi told it. 20 years earlier, Chicago, a community recovery program operating from the basement of an old church. Nothing glamorous, folding chairs, coffee, volunteer counselors, people trying to rebuild their lives. Among them was a young man named Thomas Harrington, William's younger brother. At the time, Thomas was struggling, not financially, emotionally, personally. His life had drifted off course. His family was worried. Most people saw his mistakes. Naomi saw a human being trying to find his way back, so she treated him like everyone else. No special treatment, no judgment, no publicity, just patience. Weeks became months. Months became years. Eventually, Thomas recovered, built a career, started a family, moved forward. Naomi never expected anything in return. In fact, she completely lost contact with the family afterward. The governor listened quietly. When the story ended, she shook her head. You never told me any of this. Naomi laughed. It wasn't important. It was to them. The governor's words lingered, because sometimes the impact we have on other people is invisible to us, yet unforgettable to them. Later that afternoon, William Harrington arrived. The meeting took place inside a private conference room. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. The room carried the understated elegance common to government buildings designed for important conversations. William entered carrying a thin folder. Governor Whitmore greeted him warmly. Naomi stood nearby. For a brief moment, all three simply smiled. Old friendships, shared history, unexpected reunions. Then the conversation began. William wasted no time. I'd like permission to make a public statement. The governor raised an eyebrow. About the investigation? No. William looked toward Naomi. About her. The room became still. Naomi immediately shook her head. No. William laughed. I knew you'd say that. Then why ask? Because I'm asking anyway. The governor watched the exchange with amusement. Clearly this argument wasn't new. William opened the folder. Inside were photographs, old photographs, a church basement, community events, recovery meetings, volunteers, and among them a much younger Naomi Carter. The sight caught her off guard. She hadn't seen those pictures in years. William placed one photo on the table. It showed Thomas smiling during a graduation ceremony after completing the program. Standing beside him was Naomi. Not in the center, not posing, simply helping arrange chairs in the background. William pointed at the image. That's the problem. Naomi looked confused. What is? You're always in the background. The room fell silent. William's voice softened. My brother is alive because somebody believed in him when he couldn't believe in himself. Naomi looked away, uncomfortable with praise, as always. William continued, My family never forgot that. The governor watched carefully, because she could see something deeper happening. This wasn't about money, or politics, or publicity. This was gratitude, 20 years of gratitude, finally finding its voice. William leaned back. People think success happens in boardrooms. He shook his head. Sometimes it starts in a church basement with somebody who refuses to give up on you. Naomi said nothing. The silence itself became emotional. For a moment, nobody spoke. Outside the window, Brookdale continued moving through another ordinary afternoon. Cars passed intersections. Pedestrians crossed sidewalks. Life continued. Yet inside that room, a truth was finally being acknowledged. Not publicly, not yet, but soon. Before leaving, William stood and gathered the photographs. Then he paused. There is something else. The governor looked up. So far, this story has focused on what happened in the lobby. William nodded. But that's not the story. Naomi frowned. What do you mean? William smiled gently. The story is what happened long before the lobby. The room became quiet. Because everyone understood. The investigation, the evidence, the accountability, those things mattered. But they weren't the heart of the story. The heart of the story was a woman who spent decades helping strangers without expecting anything in return. A woman who had changed countless lives without realizing it. A woman who never stopped being kind, even after being treated unfairly. And very soon, the entire state would learn exactly who Naomi Carter really was, including people who owed her far more than she ever knew, because the investigation was uncovering one truth. But William Harrington was about to reveal another, a truth far more personal. And when he finally told the world what Naomi had done for his family 20 years earlier, nobody inside Brookdale Sheriff's Department would ever look at her the same way again. The following Thursday felt different from every other day that had come before it. The air inside Brookdale Sheriff's Department seemed heavier, more serious, as though the building itself understood that something important was about to happen. For nearly 2 weeks, the investigation had expanded through every corner of the department. Witness statements, personnel reviews, complaint records, audio recordings, security footage and independent evaluations. Every piece had been examined. Every question had been asked. Now the findings were complete, and the moment of accountability had arrived. At 9 o'clock that morning, a closed administrative hearing began inside a conference room on the second floor. No reporters, no cameras, no spectators, only the people directly involved. Marcus Bennett sat at one end of the table. Governor Whitmore attended as an observer. Department leadership occupied several seats along the wall. Naomi Carter sat quietly near the center, not as a victim, not as a witness, but as the director responsible for overseeing the review. The distinction mattered. She had insisted upon it. The investigation belonged to facts, not emotions. Outside the room, nervous conversations echoed through hallways. Employees understood something significant was happening. Nobody knew the details, yet everyone sensed the outcome would shape the future of the department. Ryan Holt arrived first. His uniform looked immaculate, pressed, professional, exactly as it always had. But the man wearing it looked different. The confidence was gone. The certainty had vanished. Weeks of anxiety had carved deep shadows beneath his eyes. When he entered the room, nobody spoke. Marcus opened the investigation file. The thick stack of documents landed on the table with a soft thud. Then the findings began. Methodical, professional, unemotional. The evidence spoke for itself. The lobby incident, witness testimony, the recording, the missing documentation, the patterns revealed during the investigation. Nothing dramatic, nothing exaggerated. Just facts, one after another. Ryan listened quietly. At first he stared straight ahead. Then he stared at the table. Finally, he stared at nothing at all. The room remained silent except for Marcus's voice. When the presentation ended, Ryan's representative offered several statements. Years of service, positive evaluations, stressful working conditions, arguments for leniency. The room listened respectfully. Then Marcus finished his final summary. The evidence was clear. The conclusions were supported. The recommendations were unanimous. Governor Whitmore remained expressionless. Naomi remained silent. Eventually, the responsibility fell to department leadership. The decision was announced. Ryan Holt's employment was terminated, effective immediately. His certification would be reviewed by state authorities. Additional actions would be considered through appropriate legal channels. The words landed softly, yet their impact was enormous. Ryan closed his eyes briefly. No outburst, no argument, no dramatic speech. Only silence. For a long moment, he remained seated. Then he slowly removed his badge. The metal reflected the conference room lights, a symbol that had shaped much of his adult life. He placed it carefully on the table. Nobody celebrated. Nobody smiled. Because accountability is not a victory, it is a consequence. And consequences are often sad, even when necessary. Ryan stood, looked around the room once, then walked out. The door closed quietly behind him. A chapter ended. But the hearing continued. Several supervisors faced disciplinary findings connected to complaint handling and oversight failures. Additional reviews were ordered. Old cases were reopened. Policies were reevaluated. Processes changed. The system itself would be forced to confront uncomfortable truths. Hours later, when the hearing finally concluded, Brookdale County Sheriff's Department officially entered a new chapter. Yet Naomi's attention wasn't focused on punishment. It never had been. That afternoon, she stood in the empty lobby where everything had begun. Sunlight streamed through the front windows. The same floor, the same chairs, the same reception desk. Nothing had physically changed. Yet it felt completely different. People now looked at one another differently. Questions were being asked. Silence no longer felt safe. Footsteps approached behind her. Naomi turned. Jasmine Reed stood a few feet away. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Jasmine smiled nervously. "I heard everything is official now." Naomi nodded. "It is." Jasmine looked toward the lobby doors, the exact place where Naomi had entered nearly 2 weeks earlier. "I keep thinking about that morning." Naomi waited. Jasmine took a slow breath. "I should have said something." The admission seemed painful. Years of silence condensed into a single sentence. Naomi studied her carefully, then smiled gently. "But eventually you did." Jasmine lowered her eyes. "Later than I should have." "Maybe." The answer surprised her. Naomi wasn't interested in offering empty comfort. Growth required honesty. "But you still made a choice." Jasmine looked up. "The right choice." The words hung between them. Simple, yet meaningful. Because courage rarely arrives at the perfect moment. Sometimes courage arrives late. The important thing is that it arrives at all. Several days later, another gathering filled the briefing room. This time the mood felt completely different. No tension, no fear, no rumors, just anticipation. Employees filled the seats. Department leadership stood near the front. Governor Whitmore attended again. So did Naomi. A short ceremony was about to begin. Jasmine sat in the front row. She looked uncomfortable, embarrassed by the attention, which made Naomi smile. When the announcement came, applause filled the room. Not forced, not polite, genuine. Jasmine Reed was promoted to sergeant. The room erupted again. Several deputies stood. Others smiled. A few even cheered. Jasmine's eyes filled with emotion. For years, she had worried that speaking honestly would end her career. Instead, honesty had become the foundation of a new one. After the ceremony, Naomi approached her. The new insignia reflected beneath the overhead lights. Jasmine looked down at it, almost unable to believe it. Naomi adjusted the pin slightly, then stepped back. "It looks good on you?" Jasmine laughed softly. "I hope I deserve it." Naomi's answer came immediately. "Make sure everyone under your supervision feels safe enough to speak." The words carried deeper meaning than any promotion ever could. Jasmine nodded. "I will." Across the room, Governor Whitmore watched the exchange with quiet satisfaction. The department still had a long road ahead. Trust takes time. Healing takes time. Real change always takes time. But for the first time in years, Brookdale was moving in the right direction. That evening, Naomi walked through downtown Brookdale alone. The sun was setting. Golden light painted storefront windows. Families filled restaurants. Children laughed outside an ice cream shop. Life moved forward. Normal. Ordinary. Beautiful. Her phone vibrated. A text message appeared. From William Harrington. Simple. Direct. "Can we talk tomorrow? I have an idea." Naomi smiled. That usually meant trouble. The good kind. She typed a response. "Of course." Then continued walking. The cool evening air carried the scent of fresh bread from a nearby bakery. For the first time since arriving in Brookdale, she felt something close to peace. The investigation was over. Justice had been served. Yet the story wasn't finished, because accountability had repaired part of the damage. Now something else remained. Healing. And tomorrow, William Harrington would reveal a plan capable of changing not just Naomi's life, but the future of an entire community. A plan connected to a frightened boy named Ethan, a grateful family, and a woman who spent decades helping strangers when nobody was watching. The final chapter was about to begin. 6 months later, Brookdale looked different. Not dramatically. Not in the way movies usually show change. The streets were still the same. The storefronts were still the same. The old courthouse still stood at the center of town. The diner across from the transit station still served coffee strong enough to wake the dead. From a distance, everything appeared familiar. Yet anyone who had lived there long enough could feel the difference. Something had shifted. Something important. The change lived in conversations, in attitudes, in expectations, in the way people greeted each other. And nowhere was that change more visible than inside the Brookdale Sheriff's Department. On a bright spring morning, Naomi Carter stood across the street looking at the building where everything began. The same brick walls, the same front entrance, the same lobby doors. For a long moment, she simply stood there. The breeze moved gently through nearby trees. Birds sang from utility wires overhead. The air carried the smell of fresh-cut grass. 6 months. That was all. And yet it felt like an entirely different world. Her phone buzzed. A text from William Harrington. "We're ready. Naomi smiled. Today wasn't about investigations. It wasn't about politics. It wasn't about headlines. Today was about something much bigger. She crossed the street. The glass doors opened. And for the first time since that cold Monday morning, she stepped into the lobby without remembering the pain first. Instead, she noticed the changes. A community information desk stood near the entrance. Resource brochures lined the walls. A citizen feedback station occupied one corner. New signage emphasized accountability, transparency, and service. Most importantly, people smiled. Not because they were required to, because the culture had changed. A young deputy greeted an elderly couple entering the building. Another officer helped someone complete paperwork. Small moments, ordinary moments, the kind that rarely make headlines. Yet those moments mattered most. Naomi stood quietly observing. A familiar voice called her name. Director Carter. She turned. Jasmine Reed approached wearing sergeant insignia. The promotion looked natural on hers. Confidence had replaced hesitation. Purpose had replaced fear. The transformation wasn't dramatic, just genuine. Jasmine smiled warmly. "You made it. I wouldn't miss this." The two women walked through the lobby together. Several deputies greeted Jasmine with respect. Several greeted Naomi the same way. 6 months earlier, silence ruled these halls. Now conversations felt open, healthy, human. They entered the briefing room. The space buzzed with excitement. Community leaders, teachers, local families, department employees. Everyone seemed eager. At the front stood a large screen displaying architectural renderings, colorful images of a future building. A building nobody had seen before today. Naomi immediately recognized the design. William Harrington's idea. The one he refused to discuss over text messages. The room filled steadily. Then another familiar face appeared. Ethan, the 12-year-old boy from the bus station. Except he wasn't quite the same boy anymore. His posture was stronger. His smile came easier. And he wore a navy blue scholarship jacket embroidered with the logo of the Harrington Foundation. The moment he spotted Naomi, his face lit up. He hurried across the room. "Miss Naomi?" She laughed. The same genuine laugh she always reserved for children. Ethan hugged her tightly. His mother followed close behind. Healthy, stronger, recovered. The woman who once lay in a hospital bed now looked vibrant and full of life. She reached for Naomi's hands. "I've wanted to thank you properly for months." Naomi smiled. "You don't owe me anything." The woman shook her head immediately. "That's where you're wrong." Ethan laughed. "She says that all the time." Everyone laughed. For a moment, the room felt less like a government event and more like a family reunion. Maybe that was the point. Across the room, Governor Whitmore entered alongside William Harrington. Conversations quieted. The event officially began. William stepped to the podium first. The billionaire looked unusually emotional. Not nervous. Emotional. The difference mattered. He waited until the room settled. Then he began. "Most people believe this event is about a building." He gestured toward the renderings behind him. "It isn't." The audience listened carefully. William continued. "Most people believe this story started 6 months ago." He smiled. It didn't. Now the room was completely silent. William looked toward Naomi, then back to the audience. 20 years ago, my family faced one of the hardest periods in our lives. The room listened. My younger brother was struggling. No details, no sensationalism, just honesty. Most people had given up on him. William paused, but one person didn't. His eyes found Naomi again. Every person in the room followed his gaze. William's voice softened. She wasn't famous. No cameras followed her. No reporters interviewed her. Nobody celebrated what she was doing. The silence deepened. She simply showed up. Again, and again, and again. He smiled, because she believed people deserved second chances. Several audience members wiped tears from their eyes. William wasn't finished. Everything my brother became afterwards started because someone cared enough not to quit. The room remained completely still. Naomi lowered her eyes, embarrassed by attention. As always. William laughed softly. She's uncomfortable right now. The audience laughed with him. That's another reason we're here. Then his expression became serious. People spend their lives chasing recognition. He pointed toward Naomi. She spent hers giving it away. The applause began slowly, then grew, then filled the room. Long, sincere, powerful. Naomi sat quietly through it. humbled, overwhelmed, grateful. When the applause finally ended, William revealed the final surprise. The screen behind him changed. A new image appeared, a state-of-the-art community center. Classrooms, career training spaces, family support offices, youth programs, recovery services, scholarship resources. Everything Naomi had spent her life building, all under one roof. At the top of the rendering appeared a name, the Naomi Carter Community Center. The room erupted. Gasps, cheers, applause. Several people stood, then more followed. Soon the entire room was on its feet. Naomi covered her mouth. For once, words failed her. Governor Whitmore leaned toward her. "You earned this," Naomi shook her head. "No one earns this." The governor smiled. "You did." The standing ovation continued. Ethan clapped harder than anyone. His mother cried openly. Jasmine smiled through tears. William simply watched, satisfied. Not because of the building, because gratitude had finally found a way home. Later that evening, after the crowds disappeared and the speeches ended, Naomi returned to the sheriff's department alone. The sun was setting. Golden light poured through the lobby windows. The building felt peaceful, quiet. She stood in the same place where Ryan Holt had confronted her 6 months earlier. The same floor, the same doorway, the same space. Yet she felt no anger, no resentment, no desire for revenge. Only perspective. The worst day of her visit had become the beginning of something beautiful. The investigation had brought accountability, but kindness had created transformation. That was the real lesson. Not punishment, not power, kindness. She looked around the lobby one final time, at the officers helping citizens, at the community resources, at the culture slowly rebuilding itself. Then she smiled, because she finally understood something. The greatest reward was never recognition, never titles, never buildings. The greatest reward was seeing kindness continue after you were gone. Naomi walked toward the exit. The evening sky glowed orange and gold beyond the glass doors. Behind her stood a department learning how to serve. Ahead of her stood a community center that would change lives for generations. And somewhere nearby, a young boy named Ethan was dreaming about a future that seemed impossible only 6 months earlier. Naomi stepped into the evening air. The door closed softly behind her. The story was over. But the impact would continue. Because sometimes the people the world overlooks are the very people holding it together. And sometimes the smallest act of kindness becomes the beginning of everything. If this story touched your heart, think about someone who showed you kindness when you needed it most. Their impact may be larger than they ever realized.
When Naomi Carter stood in the same lobby 6 months later and watched Ethan walk in, wearing his scholarship jacket, she finally saw something beautiful. A single act of kindness had traveled farther than she ever knew. The woman who once walked out of the door in silence returned to find an entire community walking forward. Because she never stopped caring. This story isn't really about power, title, or even justice. It's about the people who give without keeping score, never realizing how deeply their kindness takes roots in someone else's life. Today, take a moment to think about one person who helped you during a hard season of your life. If they're still here, maybe send a message, make a call, or simply say thank you. Because Naomi Carter never expected recognition, yet her quiet compassion changed life for decades. Have you ever been helped by someone who had no idea how much they changed your life? Tell me below, and if this story touched your heart, comment one so we know you're here with us. Stay close because the next story begins with another ordinary moment that nobody realized would change everything.